Borley Rectory has baffled paranormal researchers for over 100 years. This mysterious house was located in the village of Borley, Essex in the UK, and was the site of countless ghost sightings spanning across multiple decades and reported by numerous reverends who lived at the property with their family. The building was given the nickname of the most haunted house in England, and that moniker has stuck to this very day. But what actually happened at Borley Rectory? Was the whole thing a case of hoax or hysteria? Or was there actually something to these supposed hauntings that have stood the test of time? Borley Rectory was built in 1862 in the village of Borley, Essex, near the Borley Church. The house was inhabited by Reverend Henry Dawson Ball, who moved in shortly after being named rector of the parish, taking his huge family of 14 children with him. The first major sighting was on 28th of July 1900 when two of Ball's daughters, Ethel and Freda, were returning to the rectory after a summer party and claimed to have seen what they thought was the ghost of a nun a few yards from the house. The girls ran to get their sister Elsie, who dismissed the claim and came out to prove them wrong. Elsie approached the figure and tried to speak to it, only to have the ghostly nun turn and face her for a few seconds and then, according to the girls, disappear. Ball's daughters were not the only ones to see the nun. A travelling carpenter, Fred Cartwright, who was not local to the town, claims he saw the ghost of the nun 4 times in 2 weeks. He believed the lady to be alive on each occasion, before on the final sighting, the woman vanished. After his death, Henry Ball was succeeded by his son Harry Foyster Ball, who remained at Borley Rectory until his own death on 9th of June 1927. During his time at Borley, Harry was sceptical just as his father was, and dismissed most of the stories as hysteria. However, this all changed and Harry saw the unimaginable one day when his dog began howling and cowering at something behind the fruit trees in the garden. Harry confidently went to inspect what was going on and witnessed a headless body walk out from behind the trees, cross the garden and walk clean through the locked gate. The staggered Harry also went on to see the famous ghostly coach of Borley, which was drawn by 2 horses and driven by a headless coachman. On another occasion, Ball heard hoofs and heavy wheels behind him on his way home, before turning and seeing nothing but an empty road. Harry had been very keen to shake Borley's reputation after his father's death, and many stated he was not the sort of person to jump on board with a lot of these stories, but he maintained the truth of his claims until he passed.
They were much travelled and intelligent and educated people. They weren't fools, and they certainly wouldn't allow themselves to make stories up to impress other people.
The revolving door of Borley Rectory continued as on 2nd of October 1928, the Reverend Guy Eric Smith and his wife Mabel moved into the property. Soon after moving in, Mabel made a terrifying discovery that would set the tone for her and her husband's stay. When cleaning out the house, she found a brown paper parcel and upon unwrapping it, was shocked to discover a small human skull. The disgusted Reverend buried the skull, which was believed to be of a woman, in the churchyard. From that day on, activity was constantly disturbing the couple. Smith claims he would hear whispering and voices coming from what was known as the Blue Room, which was noted as the most haunted, and Smith would regularly try and catch intruders in the house, as he refused to believe he and his wife were experiencing paranormal activity. Less than a year into their residence, the Smiths contacted the Daily Mirror, asking to be put in touch with the Society for Physical Research. On June 19, 1929, the Mirror sent a reporter who was already writing articles about the horrors of Borley Rectory. The newspaper also arranged for famous paranormal researcher Harry Price to make a visit to the house. Price, the family and the reporter experienced phenomena such as the throwing of stones, a vase and other objects, some that were not known to have even been in the home. That same summer, it all became too much for the Smiths and they left the property even without anywhere to go, taking up temporary lodgings, but claiming that was nevertheless preferable to staying at Borley Rectory. The parish found great difficulty finding a replacement, as Borley was now well known for its hauntings. On 16th of October 1930, Reverend Lionel Foyster, who was actually related to the Ball family, took over and moved his wife Mary Ann and their adopted daughter, 3-year-old Adelaide, to the notorious house. Unsurprisingly, Foyster was yet another reverend who reported disturbing events happening to himself and his family. Objects started to be thrown, and Mary Ann was once struck so badly by an invisible force she was left with a cut and black eye, and mysterious messages began to appear written on the walls of the house, directed at her. Marianne's testimony went on to be questioned quite strongly, as a few paranormal investigators went to Borley and quickly came to the conclusion that these events were being caused by Marianne. Marianne later went on to admit that she was having an affair at the time, and she used some paranormal explanations to cover this up. The Foyster family finally said goodbye to Borley Rectory in October 1935, leaving due to Foyster's ill health. By this stage, the church had grown frustrated with Borley, and the building was put up for sale. Before a buyer was found, Harry Price was able to rent the house to carry on the supernatural investigations. Price dedicated himself to attracting reputable witnesses to the house, making a point to reject any thrill seekers or opportunists. He ended up recruiting observers from such professions as engineering, the medical field and university students to give Borley an unbiased and sceptical look.
I went to Borley Rectory with an entirely open mind. I was just curious what was happening there. In order to make certain that nobody was interfering with the house, we would place cotton thread across the doors and across the passages so that nobody could sneak up. On one occasion I thought one of the pencil marks was actually moving as I saw it. It seems mad, but I think that's what I saw.
During these visits, rappings, crashings, bells ringing and movement of objects were recorded, and thanks to Price's dedication, Borley Rectory slowly became known as one of the most haunted houses in the world. Price conducted several seances during this time, and the investigators believed they made contact with two spirits, one who identified herself as Mary Lear, who apparently told him she had been murdered on the site of Borley Rectory, and her body had been thrown into the cellar. The second spirit named himself as Sunex Emures. He was aggressive and said he would set fire to Borley Rectory in March 1938. This did not happen, but Borley met a fiery fate a year later, but for a different reason. In autumn of 1938, Borley Rectory was acquired by Captain W.H. Gregson, another sceptical individual. At midnight on 27th of February 1939, Borley Rectory caught fire. Gregson was apparently unpacking boxes and accidentally knocked over an oil lamp. Gregson's son Anthony said he believed his father deliberately caused the fire, as he had insured the property for far more than he purchased it for. The rectory burned until just a shell of the building remained. A lady who lived nearby, known only as Miss Williams, claimed she saw the manifestation of a nun staring out of the upstairs window during the fire. In August of 1943, Price conducted a small dig in the cellars of the ruined house and discovered two bones believed to have belonged to a young woman. Despite the building barely standing anymore, its legacy continued. Army soldiers who tried to use the site during the war claimed they had stones thrown at them and were forced to vacate due to the negative reception they received. Investigations continued over the years, and in the 1961 investigation, a team declared their torches, car headlamps and equipment all failed at once, with no obvious cause. In the year 2000, investigator Colin Wilson spoke to a television crew who affirmed they had experienced hollow footsteps, heard voices and the creaking of a door that wasn't there anymore.
But the interesting thing is that once the rectory was destroyed and there was no building on the site, then the entities apparently transferred their activities to the church, where visiting rectors have seen figures, have heard noises. Many visitors have reported footsteps following them up the church path inside the church itself.
All these years later, this site holds fascination for ghost hunters. Russell of the Essex Ghost Hunters says his team have visited the site many times and always had paranormal experiences. They claim many times their recording has failed, and they were also victim of the infamous stone throwing. The team believes it is the nun they have experienced, and that to this day she remains a tortured spirit, unable to move on from Borley. Over the years, skeptics have claimed the phenomena at Borley was either exaggerated hysteria or just pure hoax. After Harry Price's death in 1948, reporter Charles Sutton accused him of being a fake, stating that he had seen Price throw stones at the site. In 1956, the book The Haunting of Borley Rectory by Eric Dingwall, Trevor H. Hall and K.M. Goldney was released, which also came to the conclusion that Harry Price was responsible for for faking the events. The book also references Mary Ann Foyster being a fraud, even by her own admission. However, many researchers have also defended Harry Price, including physical research investigators Peter Underwood, Ivan Banks and Paul Matabori.
There were things going on at Borley long before Mary Ann went there. There were things going on at Borley long before Harry Price went there. And there were things happening at Borley long after Mary Ann left and long after Harry Price was dead.
It's worth remembering that another paper Trevor H. Hall wrote in 1978 on Price has been described as one of the most spiteful books ever, and littered with errors. Hall looked to suggest that Price worked with many other con men to pull this off. However, it has been confirmed that Price dedicated a lot of his life to debunking fraudulent mediums, and was also very keen to have Mary Ann ruled out, at the time, as a fraudster. An elderly man who was a teenager when he visited Borley Rectory by the name of Lewis Mayerling published a book in the year 2000 called We Faked the Ghosts of Borley Rectory. In the book, he asserts that Henry Ball took active delight all those years ago stoking local rumours of the ghostly nun and other paranormal activity. He also wrote that the Foysters struggled to make ends meet, and suggested they promoted the ghostly reputation of Borley to pay the bills. As a teen, he says he was encouraged to walk the gardens at dusk wearing a black cape to add to the myth of the headless monk. Despite trashing the whole Borley tale, he does state in the book that on Easter 1935, something did happen at Borley that he cannot explain. He said the kitchen bells seemed to clang together in a single clash, and then a lightning stroke of silver blue light bounced from wall to wall before there was dead silence. He admits to this day he can't explain that event. Believers have countered the claims of the book by reminding Mayerling that the Foysters didn't make much extra money from the supernatural events, if any, and that Henry Ball telling people about ghosts was not the same as the ghosts not being true. Borley enthusiasts have argued too that it would have been very strange that multiple reverends, men of God and tradition, would for years just casually make up ghost claims continually.
You've got the incumbencies of 4 rectors from 1892, from 1863 rather, until 1935. 4 rectors, their families, wives, many friends and relatives, all of whom assert that they heard, saw and felt things which they can't explain. And I think the cumulative evidence is absolutely overwhelming that this was indeed the most haunted house in England.
Of course, Mary Ann seems to have been a proven liar, but believers rightfully point out that she is the only one in the history of Borley to have been exposed. Whatever really happened at Borley Rectory, the case has captivated people for generations and shows no signs of ceasing to do so. If the whole thing was a fiction, Harry Price and the Reverends did an excellent job at keeping the legend alive. But who knows? Maybe, just maybe, Borley Rectory was a real supernatural site that still refuses to rest to this day.